and the rain. That scoots away, and Sunday, compared to Saturday, looking much drier and much brighter, with the winds a touch lighter as well. Goodbye.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world. If
you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Good evening, I'm Mark Steyn and this is GB News on TV and radio. According to which delivery system is your preference, we swing both ways and enjoy it tremendously, all day, every day. Tonight, inflation. It used to be a scary word like cholesterol, and then it went away for a long time, but it's back. On the other hand, you may prefer to stick with your imaginary monsters like Son of Omicron. Coming soon. Oh, and Ghislaine Maxwell, the designated driver of the Jeffrey Epstein celebrity pedo racket, may be getting a retrial thanks to loose-lipped jurors. And let's not forget the indispensable part of the show, your questions and comments. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at GBNews. Ask me anything you like. Go on, I especially like ad hominem personal attacks. But first, as always on GB News, the news with Tamsin Roberts.
Thank you, Mark. Here are the headlines. The government has defended plans to increase national insurance. It's after Commons leader Jacob Rees-Mogg asked the move to be scrapped to help families cope with the cost of living. From April, it's set to rise by 1.25%. Transport Secretary Grant Shapps says it's a historic decision to try and save the NHS and social care.
I think it's absolutely right that we do two things. One, clear up the very big backlog of operations and procedures that haven't been able to take place because the NHS has been so remarkably dealing with coronavirus. And two, make sure that we deal with the long-term problem of social care.
Boris Johnson has hit out at what he's calling mumbo-jumbo of anti-vaccination campaigns on social media. The Prime Minister made the comments during a visit to a vaccination centre in Northampton earlier. It's as he denies suggestions the NHS doesn't have the staff to cope with pressures brought on by the Omicron variant.
You've got people out there spouting complete nonsense about a vaccination. It's time that government, call them out on what they're doing. It is absolutely wrong, it's totally counterproductive, and the stuff they're putting out on social media is complete mumbo-jumbo.
A paramedic who died after a crash between an ambulance and a cement truck has been named. Alice Clark was killed in the collision on the A21 near Tunbridge in Kent last night. 3 members of South East Coast Ambulance Service were in the vehicle, with another paramedic suffering serious injuries. US President Joe Biden has called Donald Trump a threat to democracy on the first anniversary of the Capitol Hill insurrection. 4 people died on the 6th of January last year, and 1 Capitol police officer died the day after defending Congress. The president says Donald Trump is responsible as he spread a web of lies about the 2020 election.
He's done so because he values power over principle, because he sees his own interest as more important than his country's interest, than America's interest, and because his bruised ego matters more to him than our democracy or our Constitution.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump has accused the president of using his name to stoke divisions in America. He claims Joe Biden highlighted this event to distract from his failings. Trump's former White House press secretary Sean Spicer told GBNews the former president isn't to blame and says Biden is keeping fear alive in the country.
To falsely claim to the American people that their right to vote is under attack, which it is not. And so they are now using this as an opportunity to push left-wing policies, which is equally deplorable.
A commemorative coin has been unveiled by the Royal Mint ahead of Her Majesty's Platinum Jubilee. Marking 70 years on the throne, it depicts the Queen on horseback and was designed by artist John Bergdahl. It's the first collectible 50p to celebrate a royal event. Those are the top stories. Now let's get back to Mark Steyn.
Hey, if you were listening to that story that Tamsin just mentioned about the January 6th anniversary observances, we're not going to be covering that on tonight's show. I rank those observances in which Kamala Harris says this was the worst thing since 9/11, and in which Ted Cruz, a Republican senator, says it was a violent terrorist attack. I rank them rather lower on the scale of importance than the news out of North Korea, in which the government announced that the late dictator Kim Jong-il is the man who invented the burrito. That's for all you culinary lovers out there. There was not a single gun, not a single knife, not a single bomb on that January the 6th business, so it wasn't much of a terrorist attack, even if you put aside the fact that unlike 9/11, thousands of people weren't dead. You have to be able to prioritize in the modern world. And America has record levels of fentanyl deaths. It has record levels of debt that one day will cause the Chinese to yank the rug out from under the US dollar, and then it's going to be Weimar with smartphones. And since the fall of Kabul, America has been a global laughingstock to enemies and allies around the planet alike. So it's completely wasting its time with this stuff today, and I'll be interested to see whether Kamala or even Senator Cruz has anything to say on the anniversary of the fall of Kabul. These days, the progressive, caring Westerner demonstrates his or her virtue by purporting to worry about something. But what to worry about? The other day I heard a big shot climate scientist, I won't mention his name because he's suing me for $1 gazillion, but he was bemoaning the way that ever since this COVID thing came along, nobody's been panicking about climate change because sea levels in the Maldives in the 22nd century don't seem quite so urgent when a new scary variant is about to come sweeping in from the South Sandwich Islands and get us all cowering before its amazing asymptomaticness. The end of the world is way more nigh than that guy boring on about melting ice floes is saying. It's a very competitive market out there for phantom monsters. When the end of the world is nigh, we all have to make sacrifices. In Wales, the so-called government has forbidden Welshmen from going to the office and only permits them to go to the pub. Hundreds of thousands of hard-working Welshmen who'd far rather be putting in a hard day's work at the call centre for the Climate Change Pre-Traumatic Stress Disorder Awareness Helpline, are now having to spend their days pretending to enjoy a 15th pint in the saloon bar every night. But what if not the end of the world, but just a serious deterioration in your world is about to descend? The cost of natural gas has skyrocketed, and China is snaffling up more and more of it at whatever price. And come April, when your heating bills start dropping on the doormat, you're going to be feeling that. That's real, in a way that Omicron piling up mountains of the dead in every suburban cul-de-sac is not. The question is whether real reality still has any salience in a world where prime ministers and their so-called scientific advisors are all wearing sandwich boards saying, "Repent ye unvaccinated, the world ends at midnight." And that's midnight Beijing time, so you may already be dead. In defiance of Oscar Wilde, ours has been a world which knows the value of everything but the price of nothing. We're all about values. What's the correct attitude on transgender bathrooms or deforestation? But the Bank of England has looked at prices and found that British companies are planning to increase theirs by 5% this year. That may be a tad optimistic. What do you reckon inflation will be by April? 7%? Matter of fact, do you know what the word inflation means? If you're under, say, 55, you've never had to deal with it as a factor of life. And we're not talking about Weimar Republic Deutschmark-filled wheelbarrow inflation, just soul-sapping 1970s disco-era inflation. And even if you are old enough to remember it, you don't remember it quite the way it's going to be for you now. If you were 23 in 1977, inflation meant things you wanted to buy being too expensive. Half a century on, it means the fruit of a lifetime's labours are worthless. Your pension doesn't quite cover things anymore. That retirement cottage you'd set your heart on, your savings account, is now 50,000 shy of what's needed. And the interest rates on any debts are going to be a lot higher than you've been used to. On the other hand, if you're 23 right now in 2022, it also means imported goods are going to cost more. And if you turn over almost any item in your house and look at the label on the bottom, you'll find that far more goods are imported these days than ever were in the Britain of the 70s or the Germany of the 1920s. Let me know your thoughts on looming inflation. gbviews@gbnews.uk. That's email, or you can tweet me at GB News. The eminent economist Vicky Price joins me now. Vicky, how bad do you think inflation is going to get in the UK and the rest of the West?
Well, the forecast at present suggests that we may get up to 6 or 7% by April. We are going to have, of course, as you were suggesting, this increases in our energy bills, and they're going to be quite substantial. The government, of course, is trying to see with the energy companies whether there is any solution to this and maybe spread it over a longer period so that the shock isn't as great as it would otherwise be. And it is indeed because energy prices across the world are going up. And because, of course, we are relying hugely right now on imported liquid natural gas. And we have, although we have improved considerably in terms of renewable energy, we're still predominantly dependent on fossil fuel.
And an extraordinary number of those gas companies have gone out of business just in the last year. It hasn't been terribly widely reported. I mentioned that China, which is flush with cash as far as most countries are concerned, is buying up a lot of the gas on the market. I mean, do you think there is the possibility, I mean, without wanting to go too far down the end of the world is nigh route, do you think there's going to be a possibility that we could have serious impact on the major currencies, on the euro and the pound and the dollar?
Well, we could if growth is affected quite considerably because we can't get the energy that we need and prices go up hugely. But it isn't so much China as Russia. I mean, the real problem in Europe has been the gas supplies from Russia, which haven't been as plentiful as had been anticipated. And that's a big issue. But in fact, in terms of Asia and the link with Europe, a lot of LNG, which is liquefied natural gas, which would have gone to Asia, is now being diverted to come to here. A lot of it that comes from the States and would have gone perhaps to Asia and now comes here as well. So what we've got is, in fact, an increase in that supply to try and do something about the price of gas. But if Russia doesn't change its attitude towards supplying more gas, because there's been a big fight about whether a new pipeline they've built is going to be allowed to operate and bring more gas into Europe. For the moment, it hasn't got permission to do so. So Russia is acting in a way that is trying to pressurize the West from accepting that pipeline as a valid one for the future. Well, if that isn't resolved in the short term, then we're quite likely to see even higher wholesale gas prices than we have seen recently.
Well, Putin is just messing with us on that, isn't he? Because it's not really an energy issue. It means that if the German and French governments get together and issue a strong statement, huffing and a puffing about Ukraine, he sits there in the Kremlin and says, OK, just turn the gas pipe off for another week and a half and we'll see how much they like that. I mean, he's using that as a political weapon. And just to go back to another point I made with respect to China, you know, is there actually a lot holding up the US dollar at the moment? Because clearly, if the world's powers were meeting at Bretton Woods now, they wouldn't make the US dollar the global reserve currency. And it's well known that Russia and China and the Iranians and all kinds of other people would like it not to be the reserve currency. Do you think the dollar is vulnerable?
It is changing without any doubt that there are now more reserve currencies than, you know, just the US dollar that we're all relying on. Of course, the pound has been one, and the Swiss franc is being used as well. And of course, the euro is one, too. So we've got, you know, a choice, if you like. But what is holding the US dollar high is much more to do with what's happening on the monetary front, in the sense that the Federal Reserve is slowing down the purchases of bonds in the secondary market. So quantitative easing, as that is called, is now slowing down very significantly. And in fact, if anything, they might start selling some of their bonds that they hold on their balance sheets and increasing interest rates. So what's going on right now is that the dollar is in fact strengthening, and that's a serious problem for a number of countries that have borrowed in US dollars, because it means that their debt is increasing. Actually, loads of Chinese companies have borrowed in US dollars as well. So that's a problem for them, particularly in the property sector. So right now, the balance is such that the US dollar looks like it will strengthen against many other currencies rather than the other way around.
And just to bring it back to people sitting in their homes and not paying much attention to this stuff until the utilities bills drop on the doormat. Do you think the people, the public in general, are psychologically ready to factor in inflation? Because, as I said, you've got to be, you've got to be getting up there in years even to remember just how dismal and depressing the whole business was.
Well, absolutely. It's a real worry. I mean, prices going up faster than wages in various sectors is a serious issue. So if you look at the public sector, for example, where there's been a pay freeze of sorts for some time, what's going on there in terms of wages? They're going up by something like 2%, just over 2%. Well, inflation is going up by 5%. So you're immediately seeing a real fall in disposable incomes. Yes, across the economy, maybe wages are rising by some 5%, but it's spread so unevenly between sectors. The financial sector doing well, manufacturing not so well. But the expectation is, and we're already seeing that with the consumers, that they're feeling this, the increase in prices in their pockets. Disposable incomes are, in fact, in real terms, beginning to go down. And you have, of course, increases in taxes coming up in April. Not only do you have the national insurance contributions increase, which is affecting employers and employees alike, But you've also got the freezing of the tax thresholds, which means that quite a lot of people are moving into the higher tax brackets and starting to pay more tax. So if you add all that plus the interest rate increase, you have a serious problem with the consumer. And as you started this piece on, indeed, it is absolutely true that businesses are beginning to put prices up. Quite a lot has been going on, particularly in the manufacturing sector, where output prices are rising by something like 9%, the fastest increase that we've seen since before the financial crisis, which is extraordinary when you come to think of that, which was back in 2008. Services can't quite do that, but they're just beginning to do that in the retail sector too. So those increases, if they persist and they are increasing by a further 5% from the 5% that already have increased very recently, then that's going to be a serious problem for the end consumer. The question is, can they really pass it on to consumers, or are they going to have to face a fall in profitability by just perhaps scaling back on some of those increases because basically people can't pay? And that's going to be a serious issue. So no, I think the answer to your question is people are not prepared for it, but what they're doing already is that they're being much more cautious with how they're spending their money.
Well, that's a very interesting analysis, as you always do, Vicky. I'll be interested to see how the COVID plays into this, because on the other hand, I take it if people are being told you can't go here, you can't go there, you can't do this, you can't do that, then they haven't been spending as much money on leisure activities these last 2 years as they would have done. So, and if you're just sitting in the flat all day, maybe you're not minded to go outside and besiege Parliament and demand they do something. So we'll see how it all plays out in political terms. Thank you very much, Vicky. Excellent analysis as always. What do you reckon? You can email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, and later on, Stump the Steyn, you can ask me anything you want. You can tweet me. Tweet anything you want at GB News. Don't touch that dial. We have a lot of great stuff coming up, including Ed West on what I think of as the socio-tribal aspects of COVID, and a strange wrinkle in the Ghislaine Maxwell case. All that's coming up on The Mark Steyn Show from GB News. See you in a couple of minutes.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Hey, welcome back. Let's get to your reaction to our top story on the return of inflation. Elizabeth says, my fear has always been that the various governments will use inflation to cancel their debts, which is what people on index-linked salaries and pensions usually like to do anyway. Oh, that phrase, index-linked. You're absolutely right there, Elizabeth, but index-linked, that's if you're thinking of taking a new job, index-linked salary, that's a phrase you might like to look for in the contract. Anthony says, an annual measure is not the best way to measure the effect on households. For example, the huge spike in petrol diesel costs drops off the annual increase soon, which will lower the annual rate, but the effect on disposable income remains. Now, this is actually a brilliant point that Anthony is making, because, for example, with the liquid natural gas increases, they began not a year ago, but getting close to coming up to a year ago. And as Anthony says, the point is not that they contribute briefly to the ongoing annual inflation percentage number, but that their effects as a percentage of what they take of your income remain fixed. So so the inflation annual percentage number may decline, but the petrol prices don't go back to what they were. That's an excellent point. Heather says, maybe global warming will offset high electric bills and then we can turn our heating down. Heather, you're not thinking big enough. You're not being ambitious enough. If you're banking on global warming to save you, it doesn't just mean a couple of points on the centigrade or Fahrenheit scale, so that you can turn your heating down. You want it to do the job we've been promised for decades now it's going to do, where the sea levels are going to rise up and then they will overwhelm the Thames barrier and wash the Palace of Westminster out to sea, and taking most of Whitehall with it, and we will never see those people ever again. If you're banking on the global warming to save you, you've got to think bigger, Heather. Gordon says green taxes levied by governments push up costs, not suppliers. So the solution is simple. Slash or scrap green taxes. Well, it gets back to where we came in, Gordon. How much reality does it take for people to stop investing emotionally in their phantom monsters? So this green levy, which is useless anyway, it's completely pointless, and as Nigel Farage pointed out just an hour ago, it's gone mostly to foreign companies. When you're shivering in the dark, are you still going to be gung-ho for the green levy? Because that's what it is here. It's how bad do things have to get before reality reasserts itself? Mrs. Thatcher's old line that the facts of life are conservative doesn't mean much when the facts of life aren't as important as the feelings of life, which is the state we're in now. This week on this show, we've noted those political leaders who have said, in that tiresome cliche, the quiet bit out loud. Justin Trudeau calling the unvaccinated racists and asking, quote, should we tolerate these people? President Macron pronouncing them non-citizens, and indeed the new legislation passed by the French National Assembly seems to actually confirm that status. The First Ministers of Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales have not been so openly cavalier in their Celtic contempt, but they seem to have concluded quite reasonably enough that being able and eager to micro-regulate every aspect of the citizenry's lives advances the impression that they are the generalissimos of bona fide sovereign nation states, so that suits their political goals. But the great conundrum for those who are just sick of leading the small, shrunken lives of COVID Stan is why, after 2 years of this, so many of our fellow citizens remain so supportive of a ruinous, failed public policy. In December, 51% of adults in the UK wanted an Omicron lockdown for Christmas. Oh, sorry, Santa, maybe see you next year. 78% of Canadians want mandatory vaccine passports in order to access any public venue. In Australia, the only dispute is whether it should be the state or the federal government who gets to issue the vaccine mandate. Let's have a poll on who makes the best jailer. Ed West has his own Substack. If you don't know what a Substack is, boy, what a loser you are. Ed West has a Substack called The Wrong Side of History, which alludes to a book of his I read with great interest, Small Men on the Wrong Side of History. It's actually a terrific and provocative read, and Ed joins us now. Ed, you make a point in that book. It's one of the central points. That about high status and low status. And you make the point that what we might call left-wing values start out as high status and then eventually everybody takes them up, whereas a lot of conservative things seem to be low status. And one of the puzzles to me about the last couple of years is that in some way being pro-vaccine mandates, getting jabbed every 3-4 months seems to have become a high status thing, but I can't for the life of me see why skepticism about that is low status, but the masses who are gung-ho for COVID semi-imprisonment is a high status thing. What do you reckon's behind all that?
Well, it's funny because everyone seems to forget that when it started, it was people on the right who were sort of pro-lockdown to start with, and who were pro-shutting the borders, and said coronavirus was going to be this really serious thing. Not on the right, but it was amongst the sort of right-wing scene on Twitter, and it was the same people who then became very pro-vaccine and pro-mask and said everyone should wear masks, 2 masks, masks outside. They were initially saying, oh, this is no worse than the flu. And in some cases, there was the argument that saying racism is actually more dangerous than COVID. In New York, there was, let's go down to Chinatown, and in Florence, there was a hug a Chinese person day to show solidarity. Just to show that this wasn't really a serious matter. And then it's kind of flipped, and it became very much. There's those kind of parties in Manhattan out there amongst very chic people where you all have to go, and you go to these confined spaces and you're all wearing a mask. And it is obviously the converse of that is that in America, at least, vaccine skepticism is seen as kind of like a Republican thing and a rural thing, which means by definition it's low status. But these are completely. They could be completely the other way around. They're completely arbitrary. The point I made in the article is that. The vaccine came very close to being approved before the election, and had Trump won, and had the vaccine been associated with Trump, there's no reason why the vaccine hesitancy couldn't have become a Democrat thing. It could have gone the other way. People would just sort of follow their tribal instincts. Yeah. So there are lots of conservatives who would like to lock down. for instance. Sorry.
Yeah, no, you were right on that. Kamala Harris said that she wasn't going to be sticking any Trump vaccine into her veins. She had no idea. It's like as if it was like the Monster Mash. You know, he was working in his lab late one night and just cooking it up in the Oval Office, and she wasn't going to be shooting that juice inside of her. But there's something beyond this here. Is that significant numbers of people seem to actually enjoy the last 2 years. I mean, for example, middle-class cubicle jobs. So instead you had to go into the office. Now you can Zoom it in, and you don't have to go and work in the office anymore. People actually seem to enjoy aspects of this COVID world and think it's sort of flattering. Oh, I don't have to go down a mine and dig coal every day. I don't even have to go into an office. I can just Zoom it in. And that seems to appeal to people too.
Some people certainly can't let it go. And, you know, I saw a poll, and I don't know if it was Scotland or if it was the whole UK, but I think it was 20% of people want lockdown to last forever. I mean, even if COVID's gone, they just want everything permanently shut down. I think it is partly an office thing, and it's probably partly just the generals, how neurotic someone is. Some people clearly do enjoy it and want to be, you know, sort of sowing panic forever. And that sort of aligns along on political grounds a little bit. I mean, people on the left tend to be more neurotic overall. It's interesting, though, because, you know, I think in Britain most people are quite in favour of lockdowns. It's quite a popular policy, even though, a lot of sort of conservatives in the media are very much against it. But if you look at the polls, all the lockdown policies have strong support amongst public. I mean, there's one today, the vast majority of Tory voters would like basically mandatory vaccines. They'd quite approve of, you know, deporting tennis players if they're not vaccinated, or doing what Macron's doing. I think that would probably be quite a popular policy if, if we had a sort of...
Yeah, but if you look at what the other odd aspect of this is, Americans have a great word, ornery, which means they're sort of cranky people who chafe easily and object to things. And yet it's odd to me that Americans and the Anglo democracies, basically Her Majesty's dominions, haven't been as cranky as continental Europeans. I mean, some of the demonstrations that you see in France and Germany and Austria against these things, or the Netherlands, these are not the countries we think of as naturally restive. So I wondered whether that's kind of changing traditional left-right ideas.
I think the French love a protest and a riot, don't they? So, I mean, that's pretty priced in. I think it's partly that in the Netherlands and Italy, they had stricter lockdowns than us in England. I mean, we had a pretty light, we got off lightly. And they weren't allowed out of the house except for big sort of walks. But yeah, I'm of the opinion that Britain is not like a particularly freedom-loving country, I don't think. I stopped thinking that a long time ago. I mean, we quite like... Yeah. I mean, you know, in a way, we're still living in the Second World War. I mean, look at the whole NHS Captain Tom kind of thing, which has become the sort of symbol of lockdown in many ways, which is, I found really deeply depressing. And in a way, I sort of felt like I was losing my mind a little bit after a while. Well, I mean, we love this kind of regulating. We love the kind of like wartime style, the man from the ministry is going to tell you what to do. I think that's really like part of the British character.
So this is like Walton Pie in 1942 and Run Rabbit, Run Rabbit, Run, and it's a way of making the British are happiest when something is miserable is going on, and they can get back into the Dunkirk spirit. Even if the Dunkirk spirit just means you go out on your doorstep and you stand there with a spoon and a saucepan and you clap for some NHS that has just postponed your cancer checkup for the next 18 months. I mean, that you're basically saying there's something in that appeals to the British character.
Yeah, I think probably a lot of people would probably quite like rations to come back if it, you know, just the that feeling that we're all sort of doing something together and someone's doing something. I mean, that's the impression I got. I don't think that we are, going to rise up and have a revolution against any regulations. And I think, the government's been quite reluctant, I thought anyway, to do things to lockdowns that would have been, I think, very popular with a lot of people. I mean, obviously, like the costs of it are going to be paid much later on. And if you're working in the catering or the hospitality industry, it's just a complete disaster. But I suppose, most people aren't. So they like the solidarity.
Yeah, it's a disturbing trend. I mean, I found that statistic. 51% wanted a Christmas lockdown. 51% wanted Boris to cancel another Christmas because of Omicron, which has resulted in one Scot going into the ICU in the entire Kingdom of Scotland. So people, there's a mysterious appeal to this. And as I said, you're great at the socio-tribal anatomization. And there does seem to have been a psychological shift after 2 years in COVID, which is perhaps not where the British people would be in a healthy society.
No, that's true enough.
Well, thank you very much, Ed West. And as I said, I greatly enjoyed this book. It's like it's a book about it's a book written by a kind of tortured, semi-loathing, self-loathing conservative, small men on the wrong side of history. But it actually is an extremely provocative read, and I enjoyed it very much. Thank you for joining us tonight, Ed West. And don't forget, he has his Substack, The Wrong Side of History. I have no Substack. The world is dividing into people who have Substacks and people who don't, and I am stackless. Let me know your thoughts on all that. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Stump the Steyn is coming up, and we might award a prize. Maybe we'll name the next variant after you. Plus, Ghislaine Maxwell, convicted sex trafficker? Or maybe not. 2 loose-lipped jurors have put the verdict in doubt. That's coming up next. Don't go anywhere.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world. If
you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
It was just 1 week ago that Jeffrey Epstein's former so-called Madam, Ghislaine Maxwell, was convicted in an American court, and now the case could be retried. after 2 jurors told the media that their experience as sexual assault victims likely swayed the deliberations. I've no idea whether a retried Miss Maxwell would be a reconvicted Miss Maxwell, as what goes on in American courtrooms bears little resemblance to reality, let alone justice, especially at the federal level. But there is something to the idea that Miss Maxwell may wind up getting tried twice, while all those powerful men she was supposedly trafficking these underage girls to, so far appear to be facing a combined sum of 0 trials. Michael Murphy joins us now. Full disclosure, Michael was my own lawyer when some crazy, insane Vegas billionaire was suing me, and we kicked that guy's butt clear back to Nevada. So he, unlike so many, a lot of these American lawyers are very overrated in my experience, but this guy isn't. So we seek his wisdom on this. Is this conviction likely to be overturned and a new trial ordered, Michael?
So, Mark, it's great to see you. I've missed you. So it's all going to turn on the juror questionnaire. So the jurors that in question were asked during their voir dire, so that's what we in America refer to as the screening of the jurors to select who will and will not serve on the jury, were asked about their experiences with child sexual abuse. And the question is going to turn on whether or not they lied on those jurors. Of course, various media outlets have asked to see these jury questionnaires, and they've been deprived of this because jury questionnaires are deemed confidential and cannot be disclosed. But there's a real serious problem here if these folks were asked about their prior experience with child sexual abuse, declined to disclose it to the lawyers, and then during the deliberations, proudly proclaimed their past experience they had not disclosed, which then might have swayed the jury. I know if I'm a lawyer and if I have a juror that has not disclosed a fact that I might have wanted to use to strike them from the jury, I would have a good argument to have the verdict overturned.
Yeah, that would seem obvious. One would hope in a just system. Could you just crank your volume up a bit, Michael, on whatever it is you're using there? If you can get just turn it up a notch. With this Ghislaine Maxwell trial, it seemed to me, and I hate to be cynical, but I've been in enough courtrooms, sometimes sitting alongside you, to have become cynical about this, that the whole idea was that, okay, there's all these powerful Americans over here who are going off to this island on the Lolita Express and having sex with these underage girls. But on the other hand, there's this obscure British subject over here who was palsy-walsy with Epstein. We can just drag her into court and pin the thing on her, and we never have to get into the mysterious tapes that were found in Epstein's New York apartment, but which the FBI managed to leave behind and which have now disappeared. And so do you think she's even going to get, basically officialdom's view of this thing is that, okay, we've closed the door on that now, and we haven't had to get any of these senators and governors and presidents mixed up in it, so now we can just get on, we can put the Epstein thing to bed, and that's it, it's over.
Gosh, it sure does seem like Ms. Maxwell is kind of the proxy for Epstein, and if there was ever evidence of a deep state, one might look at the grand, you've got people on the right and the left who have both been implicated and who seem to have been avoiding conspicuously any accountability for their being the ones that actually touched these girls. So it is troubling that Ms. Maxwell is being used as a proxy, and I do worry about all of these other folks escaping the eye of the courts, at least, if not the rest of us.
Yeah, there's a point they keep making over in the British papers, which I'm not sure how that stands up, which is that she's looking at maybe, half a century in jail if this judge were to throw the book at her. But people over here are saying, oh, well, all she needs to do is start singing like a canary about all the powerful people that she's known, and once she starts naming names, then they're going to cut that potential 40 to 50 year thing down to 6 or 7 years. Can she actually do that now? I mean, she's been. Don't you actually need to be? Don't you need to do your plea deal before the verdict? Isn't that how it works? Oh. Oh, okay. I gather we're going to try and get Michael. We're going to try and get Michael back. Oh, and here's back. Michael, just a very quick point on this, Michael. I was just saying that, all the Fleet Street papers are talking about, oh, well, she's going to start singing like a canary. She'll be able to name all these powerful names and be able to get a plea deal, knocking it down from 50 years in jail to 6 or 7. But my understanding is that plea deals are something you do before the verdict, aren't they? It's a bit too late for that now.
It's too late. It will never happen. It is a fantasy to think that she's going to be giving anyone away now, especially given that she's probably going to get a pass from this judgment and move on to a second trial. And if she hasn't pled out by now, it's never going to happen. Guaranteed.
Why, the conviction rates in the federal justice system, as my friend Conrad Black always likes to say, it's 95% conviction without even going to trial. Why do you think that, and so that's why everybody pleads. Everyone, they say, we're going to try you for 47 counts of this, that, and the other. Why don't you plead guilty to a couple of misdemeanors and we'll call it a day? Why do you think she didn't?
Well, because cases like this are tricky, because the three principal victims, or people who were claiming to have been victimized by Mr. Epstein and Ms. Maxwell, their stories had a lot of inconsistencies. There were a lot of inconsistencies with their prior statements and prior testimony. And I believe that Maxwell had confidence that she could punch holes in this, in their testimony. And in fact, the reports of the juror that claims to have been sexually abused, it appears that he raised his past experience when jurors were questioning the veracity of these witness testimony. And so I believe that Maxwell actually believes that she might have been an exception to the rule on the conviction rate because of her pretty skilled lawyers, their skillful cross-examination of these witnesses, which I listened to in part and was pretty compelling.
There's also another point on that, though, which is why this business with the jurors is interesting. Generally speaking, if you're in a jury trial, the question is whether the standard narrative prevails or not. So, for example, in the Kyle Rittenhouse trial, he was the guy who supposedly shot these cross-state lines and shot people in Kenosha, Wisconsin. And if you just read the media, the narrative is this is like some crazed gun nut demonstrating why the Second Amendment's a terrible thing because he's just traveling hither and yon and shooting people up for the hell of it. And the jury there decided this is the narrative, but we don't like the narrative, and we're going to override the narrative. In the Maxwell case, the narrative is, that we pedophiles are bad, and this woman was the enabler for the pedophile, and we believe all women, especially if they were young girls when all this stuff started. And in that case, the verdict suggests they bought the narrative, but the actual accounts these jurors are giving makes it sound as if, in fact, it was an interference in the jury process. And that's got to be concerning, hasn't it?
Absolutely concerning. And the what you're describing as to a media narrative versus a courtroom narrative is exactly why I always advise my friends on any side of the spectrum, on any debate on an issue that's up for trial, is you can't really make a judgment unless you're in the courtroom and hearing all the evidence. And it sounds like these jurors may have had some real questions about whether or not the media narrative was actually matching the testimony and the credibility of these witnesses. And had a juror not intervened with his personal experience, which, legitimate as it may be, was not appropriate, that was not the right venue for him to do that, may have actually disrupted the direction that the jury was going after having sat in that courtroom for several weeks.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think it would be a disgrace if it happened in most other parts of the common law world. We're going to have to see what this New York judge makes of it. Thank you very much, Michael Murphy, joining us from Los Angeles tonight. And we'll close this out. Where are we? We got the stump. Where did the Stump the Steyn thing go? Is this it? Oh, we have had a lot of controversy. Yeah, I think this is. I don't know what I'm doing here. It's terribly unprofessional. I should have actually gone to broadcasting school, but I didn't think it worth the cost for the 2-week course. Anyway, Daniel says we have had a lot of controversy about jury trials this week. We've just been hearing that. I'm in support of jury service being scrapped and replaced by a similar system to that of Germany and Mexico. Do you agree that jury service needs to be abolished or reformed? I actually am changing my mind on this slightly, because the system has worked well. 12 good men and true, a jury of your peers. And I've generally been opposed to judges doing so-called bench trials without a jury. But as we were talking about with Michael just then, if all the jury is going to do is rubber stamp a media narrative, then that's not something a jury did. And what happened in Bristol, for example, I think that's actually part of a larger thing that we should talk about at some point, which is that increasingly in our world, as I said in relation to the COVID, feelings matter more than facts. Values matter more than facts, and that presents challenges with finding 12 good men and true, or women or non-binary persons good and true. Will you have an anti-vax type on your show so that we can hear their mumbo-jumbo for ourselves, Ray? Well, Ray, I look at it this way, that I'm the guy who provides the mumbo-jumbo content on the show, and I don't just want some flibbity-gibbet coming in and doing freelance mumbo-jumbo. I leave the mumbo-jumbo to me. Tim says, cultural decline due to leftist dominance of education. Any solutions, Mark? Yes. We need to completely overhaul the education system, or if that's not possible, get rid of public education. Would it be better for a Trumpist style of politician to run in the next US election, Mark? For the Republicans, as Trump is too Marmitey. I think Nigel should ask Trump if he knows what Marmite is. That'll do it for me. See you tomorrow, but we'll hear at our usual Friday time, 1 hour earlier, 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock. See you then. Dan Wootton is coming up next.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Good evening. It's another cold one out there tonight. Not quite as frosty as last night, but still the potential for things to be problematic in the morning. Some heavy snow showers in places and likely to be quite icy as well. We've seen this set of weather fronts crossing the country, bringing rain and some hill snow. Behind it, the isobars pinching together, so a blustery night, and particularly across Western Scotland, Northern Ireland, showers coming in here, Northwest England too. A mixture with those showers with hail, sleet, but also some snow, mostly over hills, but even at low levels, you may wake up to a centimetre or two. So we do have a yellow warning in place. Further south and east, most places dry and clear and cold, but not quite as cold as last night. Could be quite icy then first thing in the morning, with further snow showers coming into Northern Ireland, Western Scotland and northwest England. A few wintry showers elsewhere, and then we're looking at a zone of cloudier and wetter weather coming into South Wales and southwest England around the middle of the day. That'll be mostly rain, but again, some snow is possible over the hills. Much of the east dry and bright during the course of tomorrow, but feeling cold, especially with a fairly brisk breeze. Still quite a few showers across the south for a time during Friday evening, but then turning largely dry, clear and cold with a more extended